Hey everybody, how's it going today? It's Cyclical back at you with another Naruto discussion video. Today, as I'm sure you've already gotten from the title, I'm going to be taking a look at Sasori versus Orochimaru. Just like Wednesday's video, this is another popular debate about a fairly popular Akatsuki member versus one of the Sanin. This one also has some grounding in that this fight was actually kind of supposed to happen at some point, since Sasori actually wanted to assassinate Orochimaru, which makes people think that he may have been able to do just that. There are two pretty popular characters here as well, so without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into it. Now, unlike other battles I've done up to now, I'm not going to withhold my opinion until the end on who wins. Instead, I'm just going to come right out and assert that Sasori stands no chance against Orochimaru, and this video is mostly going to be a breakdown of why Sasori loses. The first thing I need to address then is any perceived implications that Sasori might have been able to take Orochimaru down. The most pressing one of these implications that comes to mind is when Sasori tells Sakura and Chiyo to go to the Tenchi Bridge as a reward for beating him. I've seen several people take this as meaning that since Sakura and Chiyo were able to beat Sasori, then they should be strong enough to take Orochimaru down. I'm honestly not sure where this interpretation started from, though I'm guessing it likely stems from just a misremembering during a breakdown of the scene during someone else's power scaling video. But anyway, the truth of the matter is that this simply isn't the case. When Sasori is defeated, he remarks that Sakura seems keen on learning information about Orochimaru, and so he tells them that he was intending to meet one of his spies he had working under Orochimaru at the Tenchi Bridge. This spy is Kabuto, of course, and Sasori had no idea about the fact that Kabuto had broken free of his control or the fact that Orochimaru was going to be following along for this meeting. In fact, this was just supposed to be a somewhat regular meetup between the two for Kabuto to relay information that he'd gathered about Orochimaru to Sasori. So in sending Chiyo and Sakura to the Tenchi Bridge, Sasori didn't intend for them to fight against Orochimaru, but rather to simply gather some information about him. If we then examine the events of the Tenchi Bridge arc, it becomes clear that Sakura and company would stand no chance against this version of Orochimaru that shows up, and I might add that this Orochimaru is likely the weakest form of him that we see in the entire series. While Sakura was able to somewhat keep pace with Sasori in her fight against him, it's clear that Sakura is completely outmatched by both Orochimaru and four-tailed Naruto in the Tenchi Bridge encounter. This gives us a clear line of scaling to start forming the idea that Orochimaru should be far stronger than Sasori is, even without full use of his arms and all of his jutsu at his disposal. Starting with Sasori, we see that Sakura and Chiyo are both capable of keeping pace with him, which means that he obviously isn't the fastest character in the series. While Chiyo's vast battle experience was needed to help Sakura dodge the attacks Sasori was throwing out, she still was able to do so. If you apply the same reasoning to Orochimaru, he should have some of the most extensive battle experience in the entire series, being one of the Sanin, and should therefore be quite easily capable of dealing with Sasori's attacks. And I know battle experience is maybe a metric that seems a little thin to some of you guys, which brings me to my next point. While Sakura was able to physically react to and even come on par with Sasori's attacks, she was completely unable to react to Naruto once he got an amp from the Nine Tails, meaning that since Naruto was arguably not even on par with the weakest Orochimaru we've seen, and Sakura wasn't able to keep up with this form of Naruto, then Orochimaru should be a good deal faster than Sasori. We can use this same logic going with Sasori's other two opponents as well. While we can't draw the direct comparison, I don't think anyone would probably argue with me that a Chiyo who was on the verge of dementia would keep pace with four-tailed Naruto, nor would Kankuro. In fact, I can't possibly imagine a situation in which Kankuro, even during the war arc, is able to beat the version of Naruto we see on the Tenchi Bridge. And since Kankuro was able to beat Sasori later on in the series during the war arc, it's not looking likely that Sasori could scale up to Orochimaru based on this. The same is true of the general strength scaling in this matchup. We can use Four Tails Naruto as a benchmark again to illustrate the point, that being that he was able to send Sakura flying with a casual swipe of his tail and Orochimaru with one of his arms. whereas some of Sasori's strongest attacks were simply punched away by Sakura, who is essentially the exact same version that we see present in both situations. And when I say the same version of Sakura was present in both situations, I would like to remind everyone that the time between the fight with Sasori and the fight with Orochimaru was only 10 days, which isn't enough time for anyone who isn't Naruto to do a significant amount of training. But back on the point of strength, Naruto was able to send Sakura and Orochimaru both flying, was able to blow away a literal sea of snakes, and even knock down a triple Rashomon summoned by Orochimaru in this fight. The reason that I bring up Naruto's power feats from this fight is that we see Orochimaru competing pretty directly with him in terms of strength. Both in the sense that Orochimaru is able to somewhat contend with Naruto in taijutsu, and by the fact that he was able to pin him down with the Kusanagi blade. Orochimaru should therefore be somewhat comparable to Naruto in terms of strength here, and if this Naruto, who we've already established should be stronger than Sasori's attack power, is on par with Orochimaru, then it's clear that Orochimaru should be more powerful than Sasori as well. This isn't surprising, since the Sanin all seem to be very physically impressive, but physical might isn't Sasori's MO, so considering that he's on the back foot in terms of speed and strength, we can ask if Sasori's arsenal of jutsu and tools would carry him to victory here. And if it's not obvious yet, I don't think it will, and we can get right into why that is as well. Sasori's main arsenal consists of his various puppets that he can control, either individually or multiple at a time, and he tends to start the battle in his Hiroko shell, if the lore of the series is to be believed, and so Orochimaru will first need to contend with this. This should be no issue for him though, since he should be strong enough just to smash through it, and even if you don't think that he could destroy it with his own physical attacks, Orochimaru also possesses the Kusanagi blade, which is supposed to be able to cut through almost anything, so he should have no real trouble in dealing with the Hiroko shell. I quickly want to touch on the Kusanagi blade and point out that Monkey King Enma in his transformed state is supposed to be a pole of adamantine, the strongest material in all of Naruto's lore. Enma remarks about how the Kusanagi blade, even in his adamantine form, will still injure him when they make contact, and so no matter the reinforcement on a puppet of Sasori's, it shouldn't make a difference against the Kusanagi blade. But if Orochimaru gets hit too much before he can land a hit, Sasori wins, right? Well, not exactly. If Sasori manages to hit Orochimaru, Orochimaru still may be able to either tank the damage or just use some sort of substitution or oral rebirth technique to avoid being taken down at this stage of the fight. In any case, it's hard to see Sasori landing more than even 1 or 2 hits before Orochimaru takes out the Hiroko shell due to Orochimaru's speed and power advantage. Once he's past this, Orochimaru has to deal with the rest of Sasori's puppets. Without getting too deep into the weeds about it, I think that most of these won't be much of a threat to Orochimaru, and so it's perfectly fair to assume that Orochimaru then would have to take out the third Kazekage puppet. So Sasori is said to have taken down the third Kazekage and made his strongest puppet out of his corpse. But do you know who else once took down a Kazekage? That's right, it's Orochimaru, and before you start to think that Orochimaru only managed his kill because he had help, I will point out that all of the members of Orochimaru's team were completely unscathed after their battle with Rasa, indicating that Orochimaru probably only used Kabuto and Kimimaro to make things easier, not because he couldn't have won without them, but because he wanted an easier fight. And just because Sasori is said to have taken out the third Kazekage, it doesn't mean he did it alone either. Heck, I still hear people speculate on whether Sasori even beat the third Kazekage in a straight up fight, or if he just managed to poison him to get the job done or something. Whatever the case, there's a lack of definitive information about how Sasori managed to take down the third Kazekage, enough so that we can't automatically credit him with having done a more impressive Kage kill than Orochimaru did. I haven't brought it up yet because its canonicity is debatable, but there is the scene in one Storm game in which Orochimaru does encounter Sasori, and in this encounter, Orochimaru summons the reanimated corpse of the third Kazekage to fight against Sasori's own puppet of the same person. He then leaves after the Edo Tensei summon is defeated, seeming more bored by the fight than anything, and in hopes of reinforcing his own Edo Tensei jutsu. I'll stress again that this scene isn't exactly canon, but if you take it into consideration, then it clearly paints Orochimaru as being superior to Sasori here. And if you want to ignore that one, there's also always the statement that Sasuke and the rest of Hebi, during the war arc and after the fight with Kabuto, have only just surpassed their mentors, meaning that it's only once Sasuke achieves the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan that he's actually stronger than Orochimaru would have been. The last part of Sasori's arsenal I want to go over is his poison, and I know some of you may have already been wondering why I waited so long to bring this up, and the reason I did so is because it is by far the most contentious factor in this entire fight. To start with, Orochimaru is supposedly resistant to poisons, so the argument does exist that Sasori's poison would just be ineffective against him. Sasori's poison, however, is a special concoction that he made himself and is fabled to be remarkably potent, and this would lead people to believe that it could work where other poisons might not. In all honesty, I can easily see where one person might assume this poison would be completely able to take down Orochimaru since it's not one he's had a chance to build resistance to, and at the very least, it's likely that it might at least have some sort of effect on him. This is where my thoughts on the subject were myself until I had to ponder this match for a few days. That is, until I realized something that I've never heard anyone bring up before. Since Kabuto was not actually a spy for Sasori, this should mean that he would have leaked all of his information about Sasori to Orochimaru. Kabuto worked as a double agent for several years, meaning he would likely know about Sasori's specialized poison, and on top of this, Kabuto is a highly proficient medical ninja. While he may not be quite as competent as Tsunade or Sakura are, he's still incredibly skilled, and since it took Sakura only a couple of days to manufacture an antidote to Sasori's poison, I see no reason that Kabuto couldn't have found some counter to it over the literal years he was working for Orochimaru. Given Kabuto as a factor in the background of this fight, I can just as easily see a situation in which Orochimaru is immune to Sasori's poison due to some research of Kabuto's versus him being affected by it. So given that Orochimaru has a good counter to essentially all of Sasori's moves and strategies, then the only way that Sasori might still come away with a win here is if he can counter Orochimaru's various moves more efficiently. And to put it simply, I don't think that he can. Orochimaru's ability to reform his body after taking damage has never been countered in the entire series, implying that it would be very difficult to even attempt to do so. His Rashomon gates are way too durable for anything that Sasori can manage to blow them away with. Sasori isn't fast enough to keep Orochimaru pinned down in any of his combos, and Orochimaru may be able to use some sort of sealing jutsu on Sasori's core once he eventually realizes that that's where Sasori's soul is. And in the odd circumstance that Orochimaru finds himself being overwhelmed due to the overwhelming numbers that Sasori can put out with his puppets, he can simply do some of his summoning jutsus, in particular the reanimation, to summon Kage-level fighters which themselves are probably capable of keeping up with Sasori. So, whichever way you slice it, I see really no way for Sasori to take the win here. Orochimaru is simply too far out of his league to even come close to, but I'll turn it to all of you guys now. If you think there is a legitimate win condition for Sasori in this matchup, please go ahead, leave me a comment down below and we can discuss it there. But until then, I think that about does it for this discussion. I'll hope to see all of you guys in my next video, but until then, stay safe, have a good rest of your day, love, peace, and chicken grease, and goodbye.